Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of my YouTube channel. This week, I wanted to talk a little bit about zoning codes and how that relates to the house that you buy. So, different cities, different townships have different zoning rules. Some are more strict than others. It just depends on where you live, the part of the state, the village, the city. There's a whole multitude of factors that go into the zoning codes that affect where you live, and then it also depends on your property as well. If you're buying a rural property, that's going to have different zoning rules from, say, a home in a regular suburban neighborhood. And then, of course, if you have a townhouse in the city, you'll have different rules there. So it really depends on your location as well, in addition to your the type of city that you're in. Typically, townships will have less zoning restrictions than, say, a city. It also depends on how populous your area is. You know, suburb areas, city areas, they have a lot more zoning rules than, say, like a rural area, which is a little bit more relaxed on their rules about what you can and cannot do with your property in the general area as well. Just because there's less people out there and you have more privacy, and it's mostly rural areas anyway, they are a lot less restricted about what you can and can't do with your properties. But I bring all this up because it is something to think about when you are in the market to buy a home, because you may, while you're at the showing or while you're in the process of closing on the home, have all these ideas of what you want to do with your property. But unfortunately, there may be zoning codes that do not allow you to do certain things, such as building a fence or the rules for installing an in-ground pool. Usually you can, but there's rules about permitting and things like that that you have to follow in order to get that structure built. And there's also rules about structures in the backyard where you can park your RV or boat on the side of the house, rules about the driveway, things like that. Something else to consider too is the history of your house, because sometimes zoning codes are passed after a house is built, and that house may not be in compliance with the new zoning codes. Now, that doesn't mean your house will be torn down and have to be rebuilt to be compliant, but it does mean if, say, something happens like a natural disaster where you lose your home and then you look to rebuild it, it'll then have to be compliant with the updated zoning codes when you or your builder submit the plans to the zoning official for them to review. And of course, there's also situations where you can get a zoning variance, or say you have to you want to do something with your property that's not within the zoning code for your particular area. You're able to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and try to request a variance, explaining why you want a variance, what it would be for, and how it helps you out. And you can go that route to try to get around that and get an exception for your property, showing some hardship that you'll have that'll help you with your property. So it's always something to think about when you're out there. When you're out there at a house that you're thinking of buying or that you're under contract with, do some research. Research the zoning rules. Try to look up your zoning officer, the planning director for the city or township that you're moving to, and just try to learn about the code, learn about what you can and cannot do, in ways that you might be able to resolve any situation. If there's a case where maybe you want to add a structure, but you have some sort of a rule in place where you cannot do that. And talk to your realtor too, see if they can help you out with learning more about the zoning codes and what you can or cannot do after closing on the house, because you may have ideas, but there may be rules in place that prevent that. So it's always good to know what you're getting into going into a situation. And of course, it varies depending on the city. Oakwood has very restrictive zoning rules, whereas a township out in Preble County will not have the same rules, and you'll have a lot more freedom with your property. So it's something to think about as well when you're deciding on location, how much freedom you want to have with your property and how much ability you want to have to do what you want with it. So those are all things that you need to consider when you're in the market for a home, not just the type of home you want, but the location as well, and the ability to make changes to it down the road. Hope this was helpful. Please keep that in mind as you're in the home buying process. Happy hunting. I'll see y'all next week.